Welcome, everybody. Happy New Year to all our 6 listeners. We apologise sincerely for the slight delay in getting a new episode up onto the podcast. We had, Christmas time, family time, all that kind of stuff.
Yeah, it's been a busy period. Sorry.
Been a busy little period. Work over Christmas was actually quite busy as well. But we're back. We have plenty of things to talk about, so we're going to do something a little bit different today. We're going to split it into 2 episodes. We're going to make sure that Dean talks about the book that I recommended him the last time, Recursion by Blake Crouch, just to jog everybody's memory.
Yeah, that wasn't the reason for the delay, by the way. I want to just throw that in there. I managed to read it in record time for me. I managed to finish it well ahead of the month, but unfortunately there were other reasons, like I say, for the delay. It wasn't just my reading speeds. Yeah.
Logistics and Christmas and all that kind of stuff. But yeah, so we're going to talk about that, and then we'll have another, say 40 minutes or so after, kind of a double whammy episode today, where we'll just talk about what we've been up to the last 2 months since we spoke last. What we've been watching, what we've been reading, whatever. So yeah, now Dean, this book that I recommended to you the last time.
Mm-hmm.
It's been a couple of years since I've read it, and I will admit that I don't remember much about it. But I do remember, well, that's not true. That's a bit of a lie. I remember the general gist, and I remember inhaling the book in like 3 days, and it's definitely my cup of tea. But can you tell our listeners what you thought of Recursion by Blake Crouch, and also jog my memory?
Yeah, sure will. Memory's the key thing, I think, we've mentioned in that book, because it's all about memory. So where do we start? The opening gripped me straight away. It's quite a good opening.
Indeed.
You have the protagonist, detective called Barry, who is attempting to talk a woman off the ledge somewhere. I love anything involving like hostages or negotiation, that kind of scene. Like I love that. It's always tense to watch that play out. So it's a really great opening to the story, that one.
Especially if the writer knows how to write good dialogue. You can get a gripping scene. Yeah. Yeah,
definitely. So that sort of scene plays out at the opening, and then unfortunately Barry fails at doing that, and the lady jumps, and then we start to hear about this idea that runs through the story at the start of something called false memory syndrome.
Yep.
And this woman falling victim to suffering from that, which kind of explains itself a little bit further down the line, like the mystery behind what false memory syndrome is. At the start of the story, I wasn't as into it until a certain point, and I'll get to that in a second, but it kind of felt quite familiar with Philip K. Dick, sort of like, or like, I thought it was going to go down the territory of being this kind of like noir, futuristic noir sort of detective thing. Yeah. And that's what I was expecting it to be. But it's at the stage at the opening where Barry visits a hotel somewhere, and he gets kidnapped by this guy and placed into this deprivation tank. Yeah. And he gets killed. And at the point that he's killed, all of a sudden, this is when the story completely gripped me. Barry suddenly emerges out of the tank, and he is Barry earlier on in his life, suddenly able to prevent the death of his daughter, which he's been traumatized by at the opening of the story. So like the minute that happened, and suddenly we're in his past and we're reliving his past, I was completely invested in the story from that point on. Yeah.
He presents to me, what I remember is that he presented the mystery in a very surprising, unique way. Where, as you were saying, you expect something else from the first opening pages. You expect it to be a standard little thriller with a nice little concept, but then it kind of just flips a switch entirely, and you're like, oh damn, they just killed the main guy. Oh no, but he's alive and now he's a different person. What is going on? And then you inhale the rest of the book. Yeah.
Yeah, definitely. It's unfair actually for me to just say that character is the protagonist, which isn't the case at all, because like in between kind of reading those chapters, you have the introduction of Helena, who's the inventor of the device, which we kind of get to, that explains the idea of false memory syndrome. But at some stage in her working as a scientist, part of this bigger team that are doing this research into, it's to do with her trying to find a cure for Alzheimer's.
Yeah.
For her grandmother, or it might have been a mother, I can't quite remember now.
I think it's her mother.
I think it's a mother, isn't it? Yeah.
Yeah.
And as part of the research behind that and the technology she's developing, the accident, I guess, occurs that the machine that they're creating causes people to be able to go and do this thing, which is almost in a way like not like a reset code, but it kind of reminded me a little bit of the nature of video games in the sense that you can create a save point. So you can kind of create this moment where you can then return back to that exact moment in time and relive from that timeline onwards to try and prevent events that occur in your future.
Yeah.
But it's not quite time travel, so it's a little bit different from that. It's the idea that you're kind of like reliving and overriding the previous timeline, so it suddenly wipes out, and then the idea of you actually wiping out that previous timeline, that's what people are experiencing in that future when they are experiencing false memory syndrome. It's actually people who are kind of remembering, almost like the idea of deja vu, those past lives that they lived through. But it has quite devastating effects for the rest of humanity at some stage, because Helena and Barry's timelines sort of intertwine, and she sort of sets out on this quite heroic path, almost like a Sarah Connor kind of path of leading Barry along and trying to prevent the head of the research team that she was working for, I think a guy called Marcus Slade, who's kind of like the villain of the piece. Trying to prevent him from doing terrible things using the technology. And it kind of leads then to a series of very exciting action sort of set pieces where you've got gunfights and this brilliant attack in a tunnel in New York somewhere, and that all caving in, and then you've got a nuclear attack as well. And just the way those scenes are written out, they're so well done.
What I liked is that, so this guy wrote another book before this that I read called Dark Matter.
Okay.
Quite a similar premise, or quite similar story beats, in that there's a guy who wakes up kind of in a life that's not his own, and he gets abducted and then strapped to this chair, and all these guys in like these scientist guys in hazmat suits and stuff all poking around him and stuff, and then he gets basically inserted into this new reality as a new him, and he's trying to figure out what's going on, and it's more multiple realities, whereas this one deals more with time and memory. The first book he wrote, I found it was brilliant. I loved it, but it wasn't quite as personal as this one. This one I found it got a bit more personal and a bit more human, and yet some of the set pieces and action, not the set pieces, but the settings and the action scenes got even bigger than the first novel of his that I read. So he managed to swing it both ways and give us devastating worldwide effects of this stuff, but also keep it very grounded and human at the same time, which is why I kind of liked this one more, and I recommended this one rather than the other one.
Yeah.
But yeah.
It's not problematic for me, but there were definitely times where I found it difficult to try and keep up with what was going on and understand quite the logistics of what was happening with the timeline. And I think one slight issue for me is that when all that stuff starts to happen, it's incredibly exciting to read. Like I say, I love all those scenes as they start to play out. But it gets to a point where like you just have this rush of chapter after chapter of the amount of times the characters die, like one after the next, and we're in another timeline and another timeline and another timeline. And it doesn't get exhausting, but it gets confusing to a stage where like, I felt like I needed a bit of time to keep up. And I think that's just the nature of the concept, which is a really strong concept, is fantastic. But I don't know, to do it justice, you might need like a long spanning TV series, Game of Thrones sort of duration to kind of like fully explore that in a way that you can actually digest it properly.
I'd say so. I would have liked maybe a series of novels for this, because there's so much good, like detailed tidbits in the like so many good conceptual ideas that can be explored with maybe even a few different characters to, I don't know, familiarize yourself more with the world. You know what I mean?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, because there's a point where I definitely feel like it feels like a TV show setup almost, is the concept of when is it the guy from the CIA gets involved? I can't remember if it's the CIA or not. Sorry.
I don't know if it's exactly the CIA, but definitely the intelligence agency of this book. Yeah,
yeah, and they form that team that basically go through time trying to fix it. And when it gets to that stage, that doesn't necessarily feel like a different book, but it feels like the concept has kind of moved on to something different there. That, like say, would feel like this, even like an X-Files type of long-running show based around that team and what they're doing and stuff. That kind of feels like a fully formed idea that needs time to turn into something else that doesn't quite get that time it deserves.
Yeah.
But the reason I can forgive all of that is because I think the heart of the story is entirely a romance, like between Helena and Barry, and just the fact watching them through that second half of the book just kind of relive their timelines over and over again, and it's just incredibly romantic and incredibly moving watching like Helena be the hero and sort of fight to try and attempt to save Barry time and time again.
Yeah.
It's completely the heart of the story.
100%. That's exactly why I liked this book more than Dark Matter, because I felt Dark Matter might have been lacking a little bit in that. Not too much, but it lacked a little bit of that towards the end, where it focused a little bit too much on the concept and the plot, and forgot about what hooks us into these big grand ideas, you know? So yeah, I completely agree with you.
What was it now? I was thinking the nature of like it's a structural thing as well with the way it's written, again, to do with the nature of the concept itself. And I think it causes a problem for him as a writer, but I was thinking it through in my head and thinking, I'm not sure there's any other way to do it other than how he's done it anyway. But it's the idea that this could get, I'm trying to think how I can explain this to the listener, because even planning it out in my head as a graph, it doesn't quite make sense. But the idea that you would kind of move forwards in your timeline, you would get to the certain point where you had your reset point or something, and you're going to die then. And then you're going to die at some stage with this is all the time she saves Barry, basically, I'm referring to with his chapters. So Barry dies, she makes sure that Barry gets resurrected at some stage earlier on in his timeline, and then he goes through everything again. But each time, because we as a reader need to know we're in Barry's head all the time, so we need to experience that transition. But in reality, because the nature of like time occurring like in reality like all at once, but we can only experience it chronologically due to physics, but the sense that like he would have no memory of what came before until the very end point where he reaches the reset time, the time of the death. So like his character, he has to write out his character experience in that transition and be like, oh wow, I'm just remembering all these past timelines I've had. But if to capture that accurately as a writer, really, he wouldn't have any memory of that whatsoever. But yet you have to somehow write a chapter where we're aware of it and he's kind of aware. It's like there's this blank space. If it was written accurately, then there just wouldn't be a chapter there, and the chapter would literally just open at the moment that Barry remembers everything. But we don't get that. Sometimes we get moments where like Barry is the Barry who's been leading up to that point again. Yeah, which makes sense really for you to experience it as a reader. But yeah, there's lots of really confusing shit like that in the story where my mind was like,
I had to go back and read a couple of. There's definitely a couple of chapters I had to go back and read twice. just to keep up and just to go, okay, did I understand that correctly? Am I on board? Yeah, grand. Right, now we can move on to the next chapter. And I had to like go back and, is that what he said back? Okay, so he might have said that maybe 100 pages ago. Let's go back and flick through that again. And but I enjoy doing that with a book. I enjoy it. It shows me that I'm invested enough in what's going on that I give a shit to go back and check.
Yeah, definitely.
But and I like discovering writers that I can tell have a taste, so a specific taste or a voice or a style that they are clearly passionate about, and then it comes true in how they write. So for example, we'll say even Nolan with his movies about similar kinds of concepts, time and identity and reality and all these kind of things that are really fun to play with, especially as a novelist. The world is your oyster, you create everything. I enjoy finding writers that clearly, not that they stick to their wheelhouse, but you can clearly start to see a pattern and their own taste coming out in their writing. So, for example, even with Christopher Nolan making movies, you can tell that he likes some similar themes to this writer, Blake Crouch, like themes of identity, time, reality, dreams, the mind playing tricks on you, that kind of stuff, because there's a lot of fun stuff to play with there. And
Did you ever get to see, did you ever get to watching Tenet?
I never got to see Tenet. I didn't get get out to the cinema.
Yeah, it's interesting that you say that, and with this book, because I was curious. I didn't check out when this book was written until I'd finished it, and just because Tenet was in the back of my head a little bit when I watched some of this. Sorry, when I read some of this, and then I was checking it out, and I thought, I would be very surprised if Christopher Nolan has not heard of that book, if not read it when you watch Tenet, because there's definitely that element of kind of overriding and going back and resetting something. That is definitely something in that movie.
The first time I discovered this novelist was actually with a TV show that was adapted from a trilogy of novels that he read that I still have on my to-read list, but I haven't bought the books yet. It's the Wayward Pines trilogy. So there was a TV show that they made a few years ago on FX, I think, with Matt Dillon.
Yeah,
and it's essentially it's quite a similar concept, but it's a man who, we'll say, arrives in a small town to find he's like an FBI agent or something like that. I can't quite remember. And he arrives in this town to find his missing partner, and things get progressively weirder in this town. And then we start to question: hold on, did you arrive in this town or were you here the whole time? A little bit like Shutter Island. That's similar concept, and you can tell that the writer is a fan of this kind of story, and just because that this kind of story is exactly my cup of tea, I have inhaled whatever I've read by him, and it's similar to like in comics, Ed Brubaker sticks to writing crime noir fiction, and he's brilliant at it. Some writers just have a voice for the genre that they like to play in, or the sandbox that they like to play in, and this guy definitely knows. He has his craft down to a T for this kind of story. So it just makes it much easier to read the books, because it's not like they have it down to a formula or anything like that, but they definitely have some sort of like pattern that just clicks in their brain, and they're like, right, these are the story beats we're going to hit, and these are the big revelations and mystery that we're going to slowly unravel here and here and here. It just makes for like a kiss kiss bang bang type of read,
Yeah.
It's quite good.
Cinematic influence wise, when you said about like his taste and stuff like that, when I was reading it, I was immediately thinking a lot as well of the movie Source Code, quite a bit with it. because of that nature of like, even though that's more time travel-y, like just the nature of that also being a romance and also being about going back and resetting events. And it also shares that thing of that kind of like post 9/11 quality of like the kind of like the devastation of like the action, not the action scenes, but you know what I mean? Like those set pieces that play out where you've got like this almost terrorist-like attack that kind of plays out in that way that does remind you of those horrific real-world events, like the way it plays out. And 12 Monkeys a little bit as well, a little bit of that Monkeys, in there. But yeah, it reminded me of those slightly.
It's like, you know, it's like Inception, Shutter Island, Memento, Source Code, all of these kind of really cool movies, Minority Report even, these, you know, mind-bendy, twisty kind of things. You can tell this guy loves that stuff. And I love that stuff, so, you know.
But it feels like it's his, doesn't it? Like you were saying, it's a unique voice that you're getting, even though you're familiar with some of like the tone and the concepts that are going on, like from other things. It doesn't feel like it's kind of lazy fan fiction, or it doesn't feel like it's like just a writer who's like experienced too much of that stuff and is just churning out the same crap that you've had 100 times before. It definitely he feels like you say, he's got his own unique take on it.
Because I do think that it's slightly more personal as well. Like if I were to have one gripe with Christopher Nolan movies, and I don't have a lot of gripes with Christopher Nolan movies, but sometimes he may sacrifice some character humanity and personal touches in his movies for the concept. Sometimes, not all the time.
Yeah.
Like I'd say, even though a lot of people have, you know, issues with Interstellar, that's a far more personal movie to me than most of Inception is. Inception is quite cold towards a lot of its characters, except for maybe the protagonist, which of course, he's a guy that wants to get back to his kids. Fairly straightforward.
Yeah.
But yeah, I think that's why I like this book more than the first book I read by Blake Crouch, is exactly that. It feels like he wrote it with stuff in mind, if that makes sense, you know?
Yeah.
It's not just, I want to copy this concept that I really like and write my own version of it. No, he had a story to tell, you know? And
the focus isn't on like just like the emphasis, like say, purely being on how do I pull off the concept and the technical side of that, which is when you mentioned the Christopher Nolan thing, I kind of agree as well, because I feel that his brother's input in his screenplay writing at the start of his career was the kind of his voice, like as a screenwriter, was the thing that kind of gave it those little bit of heart that was needed. And then once he kind of departed and they sort of separated ways, his input just working on the writing side of things, like you can tell it's not necessarily his strength, but his technical ability to execute an idea is flawless, but it's lacking that.
I know I haven't seen Tenet yet, but from everything I've read and everything I've heard from people that I trust, he's going more and more towards focusing on the concept and the characters. But if you compare that to The Prestige is a character-driven movie with a Christopher Nolan concept, and it's perfect.
Yeah, it's my favourite as well.
Yeah, the more time passes, I look back and I think, you know, The Prestige might be his best film. But the more I think about it, the more time passes. I love Inception and I love Interstellar. But the more time passes, I think The Prestige is definitely the perfect blend of both of them, you know?
Yeah. I think there's some partnerships that people don't think about too much with directors and their screenwriters like that you can definitely notice the shift in tone. Wes Anderson's another one for me where Owen Wilson's input as a screenwriter early on in his career, to me, was what really, again, grounded it and gave it heart. And I think, like, what is it? The Life Aquatic is the moment that he departs as a writer. And then I can't remember who, it might have been, I mispronounced his name, Noah Baumbach. can't remember.
Noah Baumbach, maybe. Is
Yeah,
it?
yeah. I think he might have had some involvement in the screenplay on that one. And for me, like, just it shifted, like whatever the quality of what it was I loved about Wes Anderson's movies to that stage, they didn't change. Like, they were still like technically flawlessly made, but they were just missing something very personal that I think was Owen Wilson's voice as a writer coming through. I know he's only really probably thought about as a performer by most people, but I think his strength as a writer in those early movies of Wes Anderson's really, really strong. And yeah, but 100% with this book, to go back to that, definitely you've got somebody who manages the balancing act between both of having something very high concept, but entirely grounding you in it personally and making you care.
Yeah. I'd be intrigued now to go back and read his Wayward Pines trilogy, and even for yourself to go and read Dark Matter and see what you think of that book.
Yeah, I definitely want to read another one of his.
Then I'd say read Dark Matter, because it's just the one again as well. And it's quite similar in its story beats to this one. Yeah. But yeah, I'd be intrigued to see what you think of that one as well. I also inhaled that in like 2 days, and I remember I was like, I went back because I track what I read on Goodreads, and I'm like, yep, I inhaled that in 2 days. That gets an automatic 5 stars. Anything I read in 2 days, it's just, yeah, I loved it. I don't have any complaints. And then I sit back and I think about it for a while. I'm like, okay, I had a little bit of an issue with that, but you know, I think if you entertain me enough so that I read a novel in 2 days, I think it's safe to say that the book is good and I don't really care about the flaws, you know, because I had a great time reading it, if that makes sense, you know. And I think sometimes people have difficulty separating, you know, oh, this is of highest quality and it's quite highbrow, and just did you have a good time with it, you know? It's a basic question. Did you have a good time? Yes, great, you know. But yeah.
Yeah, no, I definitely had a great time with it. Really glad you recommended it.
Cool.
With Wayward Pines, actually, to go back to that, I remember that being out at the time and seeing the advertising for it, and I didn't. I think I went to check out one of the episodes, and I would just. It's not that I didn't get into it. I think just something else came along, and I started watching that instead. But I think what intrigued me was at that stage, I think a few years earlier, they tried to do a reboot of The Prisoner, which is still to this day one of my favourite, the original, one of my favourite TV shows of all time. And they did an update of that with Ian McKellen. Yeah. And who was it? Jim Caviezel, was it?
Jim Caviezel, yeah. Is that how you say his name?
Possibly not.
Caviezel.
Caviezel. Yeah, who I've always liked as well.
Yeah.
And yeah, so that had come along, and I think there was, I can't remember the name of the other show. There was another show on Channel 4 about some people living in a strange town and that kind of thing. But like TV had done that idea a few times prior to that coming on TV. And when I saw the trailer for it, I thought, oh, this is another person doing another take on like something strange happening in this, what seems like a seemingly ordinary little town. And there's like, they can't escape the town. And it's that kind of idea again. I thought, oh, okay, this is, but I know that it was his concept. I'm very interested to go back and check out that TV series as well, I think.
Absolutely, yeah. I'm definitely not going to give away the twist either, because that twist blew my mind. I did not expect that, because it's just a nice little twist on that trope, you know? But yeah, I will say no more. Go and watch the first season, and if you're not hooked by it, there's something wrong with you.
Cool.
Anyway, moving on. I assume this month now is going to be my turn to discover something.
Yes, so I guess it would be time to announce the month's choice for our next episode.
Drumroll, please.
Prepare yourself. Right. Yeah. I'm going to choose a TV show for you. I know that you are a subscriber to Amazon Prime.
Yes,
Video at the moment.
a new monkey in the system of Amazon's big wheel. Yes.
Yes. So we're going to keep it to a show on there, and it's going to be quite a lot of TV show. And now we can do this however we like. We could do this that you could maybe try and digest a season before we discuss it, or we can maybe just keep it going until you've experienced all 4 seasons of the show, which is the duration of the whole program, and take it from there. But yeah, let's see how you do over the course of a month.
Wait, so you're telling me I have a month to watch 4 seasons?
It's entirely, we can, and
in
for the
lockdown.
listener, exactly. I know for the listener as well, that's a bit of a big ask. So maybe we could see how we get on with just watching the first season of this show and take it from there. If by all means you want to do what I did and binge out completely and condense it all into a month, then go ahead and get through the lot. It's a show called Halt and Catch Fire.
Indeed.
There are 4 seasons of it, like I say, on Amazon. And it's a fictional account of the rise of the computer revolution in America, spanning 10 years of time, sort of from the 80s through to the 90s. It stars Lee Pace, who most people probably know from Guardians of the Galaxy and is in The Hobbit as well. Yeah. And Mackenzie Davis, who people may know from Blade Runner 2049.
Pirates of the Caribbean, is it?
No, that's Mackenzie Crook. This is the female Terminator from Terminator Dark Fate. Yeah. Mackenzie Davis, not Mackenzie Crook.
Okay, cool.
Would be a very different show if he was in the role. And then you've got Scoot. I'm definitely going to mispronounce the guy's surname, but Scoot McNairy and Kerry Biche, who both starred in the movie Argo together. They're also part of the central cast.
Cool.
Great characters, really interesting take on the development of that part of history. And for me personally, it was, I watched it right towards the end of, thinking about it, of 2020, or was it 2020? 2019, I'm trying to think. 2019, so basically for me the strongest show of that decade was this show, and I just happened to watch it at the very, very end of that decade, just as we were transitioning across, and it's still stayed with me to this day. Like, I just think it's a really interesting take on that part of history, and probably quite an important show for people to watch, thinking about the world that we live in today and how technology just affects everything.
Very, very cool.
Yeah, so I hope you enjoy that.
I'm not going to lie to you, I might watch the whole thing in the next month. But yeah, we'll see how we get on. Because I was telling you the other day that I do have a bit of a list now that I have Amazon Prime, and I've discovered that it actually has quite a lot of stuff I want to watch. I've compiled a little list for myself, so I might watch it alongside something else, and then elongate the process a little bit for me. But yeah, I'm looking forward to that now. That's another one I can add to the repertoire. Very cool.
Great. So unfortunately, like I say, for the listener, it would require having the Amazon video. Again, we're not getting paid anything for this. It's just much easier to choose selections for you all from streaming services that are available.
You corporate shill, Dean. Subscribe to Amazon Prime. Let's all increase Jeff Bezos' net worth.
Just do the 3 months trial, right? If you don't want to pay, just do the 30-day trial. Pack it all in. Like I say, just binge 4 seasons, boom, boom, boom. You don't have to pay Jeff a penny. There you go.
30-day free trial, and upload The Expanse, watch everything that Amazon Prime has to offer in 30 days. Don't do anything, don't eat, don't sleep, don't shit. Yeah. And don't pay Jeff anything. Be the best thing you can do. Anyway.
There you go. Yeah. So I hope you all enjoy. Thanks for listening. I hope you enjoyed this very delayed episode, and if you want to tune in again, we are going to have a special bonus for you next as a separate episode. So if you want to keep on listening and check out some of the things that we've been enjoying over the gap between shows, then by all means click on that next episode and enjoy.
Indeed, it'll be another little rambly episode, shall we say, just to make up for lost time. Thanks everybody.
Bye guys.